Good morning, dolls, and welcome to Little Gretchen's workshop. So I got a notion to make some different type of hat boxes, not the fancy frilly girly kind, but I wanted to make some that look like old weathered leather. Now, I don't really know whether I'm going to use these to put men's hats in them or for some type of storage, but I just thought it would be a fun project. Now, the faux leather is made simply by creating it using a brown paper bag, and I will leave a link in the description of a video where I show how I did that. Now, for the base pieces, I used a template to cut the circles, and for the sides, I cut strips of the leather in different heights. Now, dolls, this circle was cut out of a really firm, thin piece of cardboard. This is one of the cut strips, and I'm going to overlap it on the two ends to close it. Now this piece is already pre-cut to match the circumference of the little circle template that I cut out. Now creating the structure of a hat box is generally the same, but you get a very different feeling or mood depending on the type of fabric or material you use to cover or create the box. Now you can see in this frame how I overlapped the strip of faux leather to create a cylinder shape, a short cylinder shape, to be the side or the body of the hat box. And my intent was to make everything fit together perfectly, to roughly match the perimeter of the circle. But as you dolls know, I didn't measure anything. Now at this point, I think it would have been a better idea for me to wrap the strip around the circle, and that way I would have had more control and a closer fit without any gapping. So now that the first way I attempted didn't work, I went on to do it the way that I know works better. So here's my second attempt adding glue around the perimeter of the circle. Now don't be alarmed by the fact that it looks a little messy, because the process is a little messy. Now you can absolutely be a lot neater and more precise than I am, but I don't want you to be concerned or overly worried by the glue showing while you're in the process of constructing your hat. Because if you're using tacky glue or weld bond glue, it's going to dry absolutely clear anyway. And also, I want you to keep in mind that we'll be coating the whole thing in Mod Podge in the end anyway to seal it. So it'll help forgive any areas that you may get a little glue on the surface. Now, I really like the way the base of my little leather hat box looks right now, so I'm going to allow that to dry and go ahead and work on the lid. Now, when you're doing a hat box, you can't make both of the circles the same size. You have to make the lid slightly bigger than the base because it's going to need to extend past the opening of the box itself, so it'll rest neatly on the top of the box, and then I can add an outer band. Now, dolls, when it comes to making circles for my lids or my bases, I don't reinvent the wheel, and no pun intended, I use a circle template. It's really convenient because I can literally use the template to sit it on top of the hat box to see if it'll clear for a rim or outer band. Now, I did have some doubts or concerns about the little circle that I had previously cut. I originally thought that I had cut it the wrong size. But after playing around with things and kind of doing a dry fit, try fit, I think it's going to work really well. Now you can see in this frame that my base or the body of the hat box is dry, and a lot of that white that was showing before from the glue has cleared up, so it looks really nice. So it's plain to see now why I told you not to worry about all the white from the glue before. Now, although I like this strip of leather I was going to use, it was a little bit thin for what I wanted to do. So to make it a little bit thicker, I'm adding tacky glue to a piece that I'm going to fold in half on top of itself to double the thickness and make it a little bit more rigid and stronger. Now you can see that I folded the piece in half, and now I'm trimming it down to a more appropriate size, because you really want to be careful with your proportions when you do hat boxes, especially when it comes to the rim around the lid. Hats throughout the centuries have come in all different shapes and sizes, so the body of the box can have many variations, but that rim around the lid has to be right, or at least really close to right. And although I'm not a purist when it comes to 12 scale items and accessories, but I still don't want things to be obviously out of proportion. Now here you can see me now that I'm using a thinner band, trying it again just to see how it'll fit on the outside of the box. But really quick, let me give you a glance of a raw piece of my faux leather. And I'm just going to tear off a small piece to use it to cover the outside of my box lid. Now in this frame, I'm using my little spreader to add a little bit of tacky glue to the back side of the circle before I add it to the faux leather. Now you do want to add an ample amount and spread it all the way out to the ends or the edges. And you want to get it as thin as possible because you don't want it to be lumpy under the leather. And here I place the circle on the underside of the leather, or the part that's not finished to be leather. And I'm going to trim off the excess. And I did kind of trim it in a circular fashion to more or less match the shape of the circle. Now in this frame you can see I'm bending it against the edge of the circle or the base of the lid because I wanted to smooth around it and kind of stretch it so that it'll cover the lid before I put the band on. So using another piece of that same remnant, I'm using the template to cut a piece just big enough to be the lining of the lid. And after I've traced the circle to get my shape or the proper size, and I cut this circle out right up to the edge, I'm not leaving any border. After it was completely cut out, I put it right into the circle of the raw side of the hat box lid. Now I repeat, don't be concerned with the glue that you see showing in the process because things are going to look a little scrappy before it's all done. Now although this is just brown paper bag that's been painted and coated, I think it really gives a very realistic look. Now you see me fitting a small thin band around the perimeter of the actual box, trying to create the side panel to go around the base that I just created. Now in my original attempt to make the body of the box this way, it didn't work out very well, but in my second attempt to create the lid, it worked out very well. And at this point, I'm not even sure what I did differently to have a better result. But here you can see that I created the band for the lid on the outside of the box. Then I added the covered circle. And although the process was very similar to how I originally tried to do the box, this time it worked. And I felt good about the fit. It was nice and snug. And after I did my dry fit, tri-fit, I carefully removed all of that bulk that was around the border now that the lid is dry, so that everything will fit neatly inside the rim. Again, to make sure everything fit nice and snug before I add my final layer of glue to secure it. Now in this next frame, you'll see me add an ample amount of glue around the perimeter, just like I did when I was originally adding the faux leather to cover the cardboard disc. Now you want to make sure you cover the entire perimeter of your circle with an ample amount of glue. Now I'm using tacky glue, but any clear white glue should suffice. But you definitely want it to be thick enough so it'll make a solid seal between the lid and the rim. And again, don't be alarmed by the white glue that's showing because it'll dry absolutely clear. Now, I shouldn't be playing around with it at this point because it's not completely dry, but I just can't resist trying to see if my result turned out right this time. And although it's not completely dry, it does fit really well, and I'm really tickled about how it turned out. So this faux leather is a really wonderful material, and I'm considering other things I want to attempt to create. Now another thing I did do is take my matte Mod Podge and go over everything like a once over after everything was completed to just coat and seal everything together and allow everything to have one smooth coat of the same product. And as usual, I was having so much fun, I went on to make some additional boxes. And by the time I was done, I had several that were really, really cute, and I thought they would be fun for an upcoming project. Now, this is the first time I've ever covered or created hat boxes using this faux leather material. This is the first time I did it. I think I'll do a little bit better the next time, but it sure was fun trying this technique out to see what I could come up with. Now, I'm not altogether sure why, but for something about these items being leather or looking like leather, it makes me want to put studs on them. So I opted for some of my silver nail art studs. Now, I'm just playing around, dolls. I really didn't have a definite idea or design. I'm just having fun. So dolls, this is just one of those occasions where I allowed my imagination to just carry me and flow to see where it would take me. Now, before I let you dolls go, I want to encourage anyone who may be new to doing hat boxes and things like this. I want to make you aware that there are other options. You can use a paper towel roll, or you could use an aluminum foil, or even a toilet paper roll and cut it in segments. Now, when I say cut them into segments, now you can use your scissors or you can use a tiny saw. Now, always be careful and mindful of your hands. And generally, you can, again, cut the toilet paper roll with some sharp scissors. But if you were doing one of the rolls like for the aluminum foil or something, usually the roll is a little bit thicker and the cardboard is a little bit more rigid. For thicker rolls, you would need a small saw to cut it. But for something like a paper towel roll, scissors will do just fine. So depending on what you're using, they would dictate which one you would use. Now you could also, if you wanted to make it smaller, you could snip it and size it to whatever size or circumference that you wanted it to have. And instead of using the leather to create the box, you can just simply cover the little cylinder with the faux leather and then proceed with everything else I shared earlier in the video as usual. Now let me show you what else I did. So now that the little hat boxes are complete, I went on to add a little embellishment or decoration, a little bit more detailing. And I started by adding little tiny rivets around the hat box lid. Now, these are not actually rivets, as I mentioned before. These are nail art studs. But I thought they would look pretty authentic on top of the faux leather. And for more variety, I added handles to the top of a couple. So I put a little bit of some really small faux pieces of leather or suede on the sides to give the lid a more snug fit so that it doesn't come off while the dolls are carrying it from the top. Now here I'm showing you again those little tightening tabs I put on the side. Now this one I had to pinch it slightly to get the lid back on, but it's on there nice and tight so it won't come off. Now here I'm still playing with the concept of the straps or handles, but instead of putting it on the lid, on this one, I put it on the side. Now, if you didn't see it clearly when I did it earlier, I added 2 little dots of glue to where I wanted the handle to be attached. Now, after I placed each end of the handle into the glue, I used my little rubber tool to press it down to make sure that it was making contact with the surface of the box. Now, I do have a little bit of the glue showing, but it's no worries because it's going to dry absolutely clear. And in order to make it look like it's attached with the rivets, I added a nail art stud to each side. Now, dolls, when it comes to a project like this, you can do as much or as little decoration, details, or embellishments as you like. But in my heart, for most of my projects, I believe the more details, the better. Now, when I originally made these boxes, I put a string on them to carry them, trying to simulate the way hat boxes are now, but I made the decision to remove the strings. And after I added the little tab to make sure the lid stays secure, I attached the handle to the side of this hat box as well. So for one of the boxes, I removed the neutral colored thread, but I thought I wanted to keep the red string. And after looking at everything, I decided I didn't want the red string either, so I removed it as well. So after I finished the initial handles and everything on the little hat boxes, I started to get some new ideas. So I had some satin ribbon that was kind of like a chocolate color, which I thought would be kind of nice as trim and for more definition. And after I added it to one of the hat boxes to hide the seam, I really liked it, and so I continued to add more. And although I really wanted the little hat boxes to look kind of old and worn, I thought the little satin ribbon gave the impression that in their heyday that they were kind of ritzy. And while I was working, I found another brown satin ribbon, and I ended up using them both. And I really think they defined and refined the little hat boxes to give them a little bit more definition and made them look like they at one time may have been a little bit more upscale. Now, if this is your first time watching and you want to see more content like this, go ahead and subscribe, and always look for me on Mondays after 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I really appreciate you dolls for watching today and allowing me to share. And until next time, I'm looking forward to seeing you right here on Little Gretchen's Workshop. Bye-bye now, dolls.